All right, we're on. Samantha Arsenault Livingstone, how you doing?
I'm excited to be here with you today. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate this. I appreciate it. So, you and I actually swam around about the same time a few moons ago, but we we were swimmers on the same pool deck at one point in time, right?
Yes, yes, I see that Aussie flag behind you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's where you had a lot of your success too in Australia, didn't you?
Yes, and it was actually team meet was my first U.S. national team meet was in at Pan Pacs the year before. So getting to see it transform. So swimming on the pool deck
Ah,
in the Sydney
right.
Natatorium and then being there 1 year later for the Olympics. Yeah, pretty
Mm,
cool.
right.
So,
Yeah, yeah. So, your story is pretty similar to any of ours. Like mine and yours are similar in terms of like you grow up swimming, and at
mm-hmm.
one point in your career, I'd imagine you start to have these dreams and aspirations of becoming an Olympic swimmer. And, as time goes on, that kind of starts to play itself out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, you start making US teams. You come down to Australia the year before the Olympics and get that feeling of what it might be like the next year. And then
Mm-hmm.
ultimately come to Australia and, in Sydney in 2000,
Mm-hmm.
representing the US, and have the ultimate success where you win a gold medal.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess that's truly where the next half of your life begins too. Like
Yeah.
the first half of your life is kind of building up towards that. And it seems like your story has kicked on from that moment where you've had this experience, and ultimately it's not as fulfilling as you had imagined it might be. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I didn't know that that could happen, to be honest. When you grow up watching the clips on TV and reading at the time, it was Swimming World magazine. And you just, I guess our minds are really great at creating stories. So the story that I had created in my mind was like, you achieve this thing, and then you'll just have this eternal sense of peace and
Mm,
satisfaction and fulfillment.
right,
And so
right.
getting there and realizing like, oh wait, I'm still me, like waking up the next day and saying like I'm still me, and also that voice didn't go away, it actually got louder, right? Preparing for the media run and doing interviews and all the swirl that comes post Olympics, post gold medal. And so that, yeah, it was, I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't have language to talk about that. I didn't know other people had similar experiences of standing up on the podium, like literally living the moment you dream about and having it be both beautiful and fulfilling and so like fun. And also at the same time going like, this is it. Like, wait, I
Mm.
thought this would be different. And
So
so,
how
yeah,
old were you at that time when you were standing on top of
18,
18?
18,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. So still
So
still young in the swimming sense, right? You're basically just out of high school?
literally just graduated high school and I deferred my admissions. I had committed to University of Michigan and then took a year off to train. So I deferred my admissions for a year to stay home with my club coach and train for trials. Yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
Outside of Austin. So
Oh,
yeah, Northeast. Yeah, I know where your roots
no,
are now,
I'm in
right?
Boston. This is
Yeah.
Boston.
Yeah. So Boston girl, born and raised, and also commuted. So my like local club team, the coach that took me to the Olympics was 60 miles west, so more towards Central Mass. So that was quite that in of itself was a story, huge commitment as one of four kids, right? Making that drive and planting my roots there while growing up outside of Boston, 15 miles northeast. So it was like you talk about that part of my life being driven toward that goal, like it, yes, in every sense, and also my siblings as well, because there was this commitment from the family of supporting me and supporting really
Mm.
all of our dreams. So yeah,
So
yeah.
this idea of the Olympic dream, then it's different for everybody. It comes at different
Mhm.
points. When did it actually become kind of a dream for you? How did it start, and then
Yeah.
how did it kind of manifest itself over time?
Yeah. So this is the part of the story that I like. For 16 years after Sydney, I told truths and a version of it, like speaking and podcasting and doing all the things related to the journey, where I only talked about the parts that I thought people wanted to hear.
Right,
And
right.
now I'll share what I know now to be true. And I look back from a different perspective. I've always been lit up by chasing dreams. So like so inspired by Mia Hamm, who was a soccer player when I was growing up. I played soccer as well for a really long time. and being able to see her in person with the U.S. national team when they were making their mark, right? Like coming into the world, playing club soccer, getting to see her, seeing Jenny Thompson, who was from New Hampshire, and we would swim at her pool in Dover, seeing her in glimpses of this, and Jill Johnson, who was a U.S. Olympian in '92, at a 10 and under banquet, seeing this real life human who did this thing. So there was like planted inside, I was always lit up by this wonder and curiosity of like, what would it be like? Like, I want that. I want to experience that. This moment that they're talking about, right? Be part of that. And that it evolved. So it was kind of this combination of growing up in a home with very young parents. My parents were teens when they had my older brother, where we grew up lower middle class. Both of my parents high school educated. My mom eventually went back and is now a nurse, but it was hard at home. And so there was abuse, there was alcohol, there was all sorts of things. And so my safe space was the water. And so what was this like drive and wonder and awe of like chasing this thing that literally still lights me up thinking about what's next, right? Like I love striving and I find such joy in that. And also it was my safe place where I felt like if I could just, get it right and just keep achieving, like I could fly under the radar and keep things, bring peace into our home. And that, right, is coming from a place of really wanting to be seen and to be loved and to feel that sense of safety. So that then you can't get that when you get to the top of the podium. So therefore the letdown, right, of like wanting something that you can't get outside of yourself, right? When you get, so like achieving this dream never brought that inner peace because it's not possible. So so as a little kid, it was so driven and lit up by wonder, and then had these incredible real life role models who were such expanders and like showing me that it's possible. And then combine that with swimming and achievement as well as the classroom. I mean, I graduated top of my class. I think I was third in my graduating class taking EPs, like just poured myself into achieving. And that achievement was my armor. Yeah.
Do you think you're unusual? Do you think this is a normal feeling, a normal experience that most Olympic medalists might have?
Now that I've started to talk about it and like the conversations changed, I feel, I mean, I think that there are a lot of, so BJ Bedford, do you know BJ?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She was one of the first to say like, yeah, me too, like me too. Right. And that was so powerful for me because she was somebody that I looked up to and was teammates with. And so there's that part of while you're striving and silently suffering, like people aren't talking about what's going on in their inner world. It's just like achievement focused. Here's the, like, get the things done that we need to get done. And there's like this performative pretend like it's all good on the outside. And so I can't speak for everyone. I would say that all of us have stuff like that we've, right, from childhood, from growing up, from the world, like we have stuff, and what that looks like for each of us. Like I do think that we experience different levels of pain. And so for some, like sports, that safe place, for others, it's a source of pain. So I think we all have, I like to think of it in terms of like icebergs. It's like what we see is the tip of the iceberg, and all of us have a story underneath. And so what drives us, what motivates us, what those experiences, how they shape us, like that's going to be unique to each individual.
Yeah. So it took you years to kind of figure this stuff out too, right? Like, you win in 2000 and then you go on, have an incredible career at the University of Georgia. You end up swimming there and doing really well. But then it wasn't until kind of years later where you started to have the true realizations of and manifestations of really these feelings, right?
Oh, being able to understand. Absolutely. At 18, I had no idea. I will say that coming off the podium and landing, I followed through with my commitment to the University of Michigan and then ended up transferring. But I was swimming in Sydney. So the summer right before Pan Pacs in 99, I tore tendons in my shoulder. And at that point, it was like I could swim through it, just deal with the pain, physical pain, and manage it the best I could. So we made that decision. So post Sydney, a year later, after having just like been managing pain, my shoulder was done. So I arrived to campus and literally like from the highest of highs, and then this rumbling of like, what's happening? I thought this would be different, to actual physical pain. That sent me into a really dark place where I navigated pretty deep depression. And then that lack of control, things spinning outside of my world, I grabbed onto food as something to control. So it manifested into an eating disorder. And I share that because I think that, I think it's important to talk about, number one. And number two, that visit to the darkness, I was thankfully, it's what huge part of what drives my work today, thankfully connected with Greg Harden. Have people brought him up to you before?
No, who's Greg Harden?
Oh my gosh, he's amazing. He just retired from University of Michigan. Bo Schembechler, football coach back in the day there, hired him. He's a social worker. And he brought him into the football building. So at the time, when I arrived there, I was just like told to go see this guy, Greg G, right, was his name.
Right.
And he stands like, I don't know, he's like 6'4". And you enter his office and he's just like, he to sit down, and on his shelf, you see a picture of Desmond Howard and him. And Tom Brady and him, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
Tom had just graduated from the University of Michigan. And I'm like, I didn't want to go see him. I was like a little bit resistant and mouthy. Like, I'm good. Like, I don't need this. Like,
Right.
I've got it all together. Like, I'm good. I'm supposed to be the Olympic gold medalist coming in and having it all together and having this freshman season. But after the surgeon told me that I couldn't swim anymore, that I literally needed to get out of the water to heal my shoulder enough to have the surgery, then I was like, okay, I'll go see this guy. And it changed my life. Like, it transformed, because he didn't take my bullshit. Like, he was like, all right, like, let's work together. And we walked together for 2 years.
Wow.
Where he helped me separate. And it is the foundation of the work I do in the world now, and why. He helped me pull apart who I am versus like what I was doing. So like, I am Samantha, not Samantha, a swimmer. And then he helped me understand mindfulness long before it was a buzzword, right? And integrating that into my life, which helps with performance as well. But really at that time was helping me to walk through that darkness. So he helped me heal my relationship with myself, really get to know my truest self.
Right.
Helped me heal my physical body. I went through my surgery and then ended up transferring to the University of Georgia, and ended my career, I would say, happy, healthy, and faster. Like, I was thriving there in Athens, and with that team and the coaching staff. And it wasn't until 13 years later that I could even have this conversation with you, until my daughter. So I have 4 daughters. And so I have an older daughter, and we share the twins, right? Twins in the middle, and then a younger daughter. And one of our twins needed open heart surgery.
Wow.
And so I'd done a lot of healing, right, with Greg, and kind of finding my way in the world. I was passionate about education and teaching and coaching and all of these things. And then this life event happens that brings you to your knees. And that experience shattered what remained of my perfectionist armor, of that idea of like, if you just try harder, you can control all the things. And I was forced to rumble with, I think, one of our greatest fears as humans, which is staring death in the face, as we stood by her bed and walked with her for 41 days through that really tumultuous time. And then it turned into years of just having a child that's on round the clock medication.
Right.
So that experience thrust me into healing. Like, I had no choice. I had young kids. I had to find my way in the world. And so that experience of healing was the same time so I was on my feet, finding my way, starting to, share my story a little bit more and look back a little bit. And that was coinciding with Rio and the behavior of the Olympians and the US team post Rio. And I'm like, how has it been 16 years and just not much has changed? And then the other question that I had was like, can we actually get to the top of sport and be healthy? Like, can we do both? Can we cultivate greatness and also be healthy?
That's kind of my question to you too, is like, for somebody that has had that experience, and you say many athletes do, and to be quite honest, I can kind of relate to a lot of what you're saying in terms of not feeling fulfilled, but then there's also that pursuit, that pure pursuit of striving for excellence and wanting to be the best we can, and still having these Olympic dreams and having aspirations to stand on the top of the podium. So how do you then actually are able to be fulfilled in that pursuit, right? Get exactly what we need to get out of that, right?
Yeah, that's where the separation of human and like who we are at our core and what we're striving for in our actions. That striving is that craft. We're honing this craft. And that is the space, exactly what you're asking. Because that place of like, can you do both? Like, and then then you go like, is it even worth it to chase these things? And I like
Right.
have landed in this space of being able to now support and see it happen in the way that I'm able to work with others. And when we have specific skills, like when we can cultivate the skill set to navigate this internal world, and we have a rock solid foundation of who we are versus what we do,
right.
Absolutely. I think that you get to those moments and can fully feel the joy because you're not looking for something outside of yourself to fill you. You already know. And I use my two fists because there's this exercise that I learned from Dr. Becky. She does parenting work, but this applies for us too in the sports space of like, if you hold your fist out in front of you, your left fist is who you are, and your right fist is your behavior in the world. So your sport, your craft, right? You're swimming. So when things are going well, right? Things are going well, right? We're up here. Things are not going so well. It's down here. But this left fist never moves because it's who we are and it's rock solid. And so when we can experience, right? We have the highs, we're doing well, we're thriving. It's not this road of like combining who we are and what we do, where when I'm doing well, I feel great and on top of the world. But do I really? Because it's never enough. And then when I'm not doing well, I go into that space of feeling shame and like, I'm not enough. So when we can teach this core concept that you are not what you do, right? So like you are a human who's swimming and striving or whatever sport it is, or whatever pursuit like us, right? Post swimming now, and we're, doing all sorts of creative things and endeavors. And so striving in that capacity. And that I think is a critical, one of the most critical foundational concepts that we need to be teaching. So that when you get to these moments, you can feel it. And maybe you're disappointed because you could have done better on a turn or start or whatever. And that stays contained, right? It doesn't chip away at who you are in the world where you leave feeling less than.
So 2016, you're sitting there, you're watching the Olympics, you have this experience again where you're having these feelings come up, and then you've had time to kind of, have your own self-analysis through this period of years, right? So then you decide to found the Livingston High Performance and the whole athlete initiative. So talk to us about those two things.
Yeah. I smile because I wasn't sure I wanted to go back into sport, right? At the time, I was thriving as an entrepreneur, helping women, doing high performance coaching, but in that space. And I felt the moment for me. So in watching Rio, exactly like you described, right? I'm at this place, and now my kids are old enough to go, wait, you know them? You did that thing. Where's all your stuff, Mom? And it was shoved in boxes in the basement.
Oh, wow.
So we started to unpack those boxes, and they were like, I don't know if you have do you still have all your medals?
I have this flag. That's the only thing I hang on to.
So I have, that was boxed for me too. And so all of the things, they start literally dressing up. And I'm holding at the time my fourth daughter, who's a newborn, and she's in my lap, and I'm watching my kids, and they're like putting on all these age group medals that like I don't know what to do with those, right? So they're just, it's pure joy. They're having fun, and they put on my cap and my goggles, and I open up and find my logbooks that captured my inner world and what was my training regimen, and then like comment, like pace, like tempo, all the things that I tracked. And I, was flipping through and seeing the evolution from what was a training log to then becoming a capture of my inner critic and the beginning of a pretty rough ride with an eating disorder.
Oh, so you were recording some of this then?
All of it. And it's fascinating. And I went in 2018, I went back to USA Swimming Convention and shared with the coaches actual snapshots so they could see that there was this, like, what you see on the outside and what was happening internally.
Yeah.
Just so that we stay curious and don't make assumptions about what we think people are going through or navigating. And that was the moment when I went, how does this happen? Like looking at my girls going like, how does this voice become so dominant that it then hijacks behavior and ends up down that path? And so that was a moment. It was one of those, you feel it in your body. And I'm like, okay, like I'm going back into sport. And so I had already been deep into literature, and my husband works at a college. So I was like in the library pulling research for the past, it was like 4 years at that point, of like trying to answer that question of what skills can we teach so that we can empower our young people, right? Ahead, like upstream. So we're not constantly reacting and putting out fires. So I had the knowledge and I have the experience as an educator. And so I'm like, we've got to teach this. because it's helpful to share story. It's not enough to just stay at that space where we're sharing athlete stories, creating awareness, which is important, but we're not helping with aligned action. Like, what do we do now? So it was like, what's next? Okay, so I can go share my story, but where's the place for true skill building? And it literally, I mean, it exists in pockets, but there's a like legit missing pillar when we talk about training in sport. Like the three things you can train: the physical body. There's so much there, right? That alone is a lot. Then there's the technical component of any sport or craft, and then there's this mental pillar, and that's just, it's simply missing. And so being able to figure out, how do we elevate well-being and also help access flow state in that peak performance? Like, how do we do both? So that's the why behind it.
So did you start to write curriculums and things like this?
Yeah, so I started to exactly that, right?
Wow.
So I've been able to, and that's like, I would say one of my strengths as an educator was exactly that, is figuring out how do we map this? Like, here's where we are, right? And then here's where we want to go, and how do we help people learn the skill set, and then be able to build the neural pathways to be able to get to the space where they're able to do that and feel empowered. So yes, it's been a whole, and lots of tweaking along the way, because you can have these ideas, and then when you get out and put it into practice, if people aren't, they're saying like, hold on, wait, and dots aren't connecting, then you got to go back to the drawing board. So it's been lots of iterations and evolution, and it looks different depending on what group I'm working with, to be honest too. And where they are and what supports they have.
Well, it's been timely. I mean, since 2016, mental health has really come to the forefront of athletics. I mean, we see it a lot. I mean, even in our sport, Michael Phelps is kind of the leader in talking about mental health, right? And he's taken a huge leadership role in that aspect. And I think what it's done then is opened up doors for someone like you to come in and say, hey, I have this curriculum where we can go in and we can educate and we can teach and really get athletes to a much healthier place, right?
Yes. And what's been so cool is, you can show them the research, really. You can tell them, right? And until they experience that, oh, like both are possible, like until they experience the connection of like, oh, this, like talking about where I'm at on this, I use the same here scale. And it's like, where am I at on this? And with some of the teams, it's like hanging like for everyone to see in the team rooms and in the dry land room. And so when they start to connect the dots themselves, it's so powerful. It's empowering. Yeah. And that idea also of taking mental health as a word and concept and paralleling it to physical health, that it's more, I think we interchangeably use mental health and mental illness, instead of seeing it as like, we have physical health, and ideally, because like there's different, but that looks different for each person, and we're going to have ups and downs. Of course we are. And then there's times we're going to need to go to the doctor because we need supports. And then there's times we're battling illness. And so the same is true on that mental health front. So it's really getting in and disrupting the narrative, about how we think about it, so that it becomes more accessible to talk about, especially with coaches.
Right. I mean, you used to do a lot of work too at Georgia, I'm sure. I mean, you probably, and even before you went to college in high school to make an Olympic team, you'd put in hours and hours of work and you're grinding hard. So where is the balance then between the work that is absolutely necessary, which you did, which you have to do in order to be successful, but then also the balance between saying, hey, I'm doing too much. My mental health is taking a hit here. Writing that line, you know what that line is too. It's that line where we say as athletes, I just got to push a little bit harder here. I got to push. I got more in me. I got to push harder. Or I don't know if I got more in me, but I got to try and attempt. I got to push harder. And then you cross that line where you've pushed too far, and then no one's noticing other than you. You're kind of like getting swallowed in this sea of emotion where it's like you feel like you're the only one going through something. And you don't know how to express it, right? So there's that line for athletes, isn't there?
Yes. And growing our awareness of that. So that's why, like, when we think about, there's a slide I share when I'm, especially like coaches having these conversations or introducing this concept of like just straight down the middle. And I actually steal the language from my husband's a strength coach, and it was from his conference. They call it left of boom being the issue or event, right? And then right. So on the left side, like we've got to do the proactive that work ahead of time to equip athletes with like grow their awareness of what's happening in their body. Like actually that they have emotions. We know we do, but we don't talk about it. We don't know like what actually we're feeling and that we're having thoughts. And so that's where the skill building on that side is so powerful, because when you're more aware and then you realize like, oh, this is what I'm feeling, and here's a story that I'm telling myself, then you have some tools to navigate that space. And so you're not going to get it right every time, but you'll be able to make more informed decisions about, is this time to literally like get it done and just push through?
Right.
Or is this time for me? Is it better for me to take a day and rest? Like those are decisions that we've got to make internally. And right now, I would say collectively, the majority of athletes, because of the coach athlete dynamic and the way that it's historically just how the dynamic is like, I'm going to turn to you to tell me what I should do because you're the boss of me, right? Versus this collaborative like relationship and dynamic between coach and athlete, where the athlete's going inward to say like, what's actually happening in here? Let me communicate this information and we'll bounce ideas to figure out what the next best step is.
Right. So, yeah, that's super cool. I like that. And I've thought about this a lot too, and I think this is so needed for starters, but I think it's part of a natural progression for any athlete to truly understand themselves, and have that toolkit of understanding. One of the things that's really one of my superpowers, one of the things that impresses people is that very early on we had these sports scientists. One guy in particular, Bob Trefine, he just passed away, unfortunately, but he created this heart rate monitor. And what he would do, he'd have this little machine, and it had a wire to it, and then it had this little thing on the end, and you would kind of stick it on your heart.
And we use that.
Use that thing. It's like Bob Trefine invented this thing, but he would walk around the pool deck and he'd throw it at you. And,
exactly.
So like for years on end, I was always sticking this heart rate monitor to myself at the end of we'll do 3100s like I'm sure you did. And then at the end of each one, you're trying to guess your heart rate. But by the end of it, I was so good at this that I knew exactly what my heart rate was. I could tell him before he told me. And so I have this superpower now that when I'm at the gym and I put my hands on the elliptical, I just look across, to the person I'm working out with. I'm like, I bet you it's 158, and it pops up. And like, how the hell did you know that? I'm like, I just know myself so well. So that's kind of the way I imagine this is like, we need to be trained in this awareness of mental health as well. And before it gets to the point of like, when you're doing these heart rate sets of like, oh, my heart rate's just beating out of my chest and I don't know how to control it type thing. Whereas when you understand heart rate and you understand how to control it, you become very powerful. And this is the same thing with mental health, I'd imagine. So everything that you're teaching is just building an awareness in an athlete to understand themselves better, right?
100%. Yes. And leading in with curiosity. And also, so what's been cool, and it's been received well so far, I think. I was an anatomy and physiology teacher. So my background's in cellular biology, and I was a biology and anatomy and physiology teacher. I leverage that like nobody's business, because we're not like, when you talk about learning about your body and that awareness, it's so important for us to understand what our brains are doing. And that part of teaching, here's like your prefrontal cortex, which in the population I work with, for the most part, it's still developing, right? This is like the logic and planning and thinking part of our brain, the most evolved part, and then the very big, the emotional center. And so helping them understand what's happening is like their brain doing a great job being a brain, is that alone, instead of saying you're not alone and we're all in this together, that's powerful and helpful and affirming. And also, I think that next level of understanding what's happening to me, what's happening inside of me, when we can normalize and ground it and saying, oh yeah, this is what's happening. Like your amygdala in the back, and we use different language for like whittle the worrier is the language we use for it. Of like, it's constantly scanning for danger, whether that danger is real or imagined. And so helping them understand what's happening, it's almost like a door then opens, because they can put the judgment down and go, oh, that's what my brain's doing. Okay, so now I can access the tools, right? So when I'm experiencing panic and panic attacks, it feels dangerous. And then we draw comparisons to when you're standing in line, waiting for a roller coaster, like what's happening in your body. Palms are sweating, mouth is dry, belly's spinning, and yet we know we're going to be okay, right? So it's helping them understand like the actual physiology of their
Right.
body, as
Right.
well as, right, being able to connect the dots and then say, what do I do about it? Like, how do I move through this? Right.
How long does it take to get to this awareness? How long does it take to go through a curriculum like yours, or come in and work with a team or an
Yeah.
organization?
I think it depends on their starting spot. I know that's not a great answer. It's just a real answer of like, what do they have as far like how old are they? And
Right.
then, I would say even the first few sessions where you're able to, so I usually will lead with story of my own story, which is vulnerability first. And I think I've watched you do this, right? Like that is a powerful door opener as well.
Right.
Leading first with vulnerability, sharing my story, and then presenting the problem of like, you put all these, like you said, all those hours you put in to the craft.
Mm.
And then when that moment that it matters, when your mind and body aren't in line, that's so frustrating, right? So like you've done all the work, you've put in all the hours, you've done the training, and yet then the moment it matters and you're wanting to withdraw on those deposits, like your mind is not online and you don't know what to do about it.
Mm.
So that idea of coming in and sharing story and then normalizing struggle and starting to form that foundation of language, teaching some critical concepts. So a few sessions there, and then it depends on who you're working with, what supports they have, and then how willing the coaches are to integrate and start to fold in the work into the daily, like take a little bit, 5 minutes. Really, that's what neuroscience tells us is between 5 and 11 minutes of mindfulness practice. And that does not mean just sitting on a mat. It could mean sitting on a yoga mat, but it does not necessarily have to mean that. And integrating that can change our brain, right? So it builds those neural pathways that we need to be less reactive, come off of autopilot, be more in that place of power. So I think I would say like my like offerings are created such that it's like a 9-month beginning, right? So it's like this walk for 9 months where you're able to do that. And then the academy, which is individuals can go in and do it themselves, is set up so that it's stripped over a 3-month period, and then they have access forever for life, so they can revisit concepts. So yeah, so it depends on where they're starting. That's
Well, it just seems like a logical kind of segue for you, for someone who's gone through what you went through with USA Swimming, and then created this. Like, wouldn't you be at the forefront of this with USA Swimming? Then shouldn't you be like leading the next generation of like, hey, I've studied this, I've learned this, and seen this, especially coming off the back end of a guy like Phelps, who had so much success, right? Like 23 gold medals, and yet still talks about the fact that he was dealing with the fact that he wanted to kill himself at times, like, and just deep depressions and things like that, and yet still maintaining, incredible success, right? So where's the connection between you and USA Swimming these days then?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So they hired Emily, which I'm pumped about, which is a new position for the national team and junior national team. So she also was at Michigan, and she worked with and alongside of Greg and helped create that Athletes Connected program that's phenomenal there. So that's a huge positive step. Where am I with USA Swimming? So I will say that in 2017, I did a coaches clinic. So back a little while ago now, right? 6 years. It's time. And I think so. It's been a slow journey, and also there is movement now, and so they're putting people in place, personnel in place. So Emily's coming in place, and then I've been invited to convention to start those concepts, and from there, really, I think at the time, so convention was 2017 or 2018. And they were really looking for me to collaborate with LSCs, which I did. So I was able to partner. So specifically with Niagara, we created an athlete well-being initiative, and moved from planting, like they had this idea of how they want to support, and then we saw it through to now it's sustainable, and they have people in-house who are helping to keep it running. So that was the model at the time. I think now Terry Jones, I don't know if you know who he is. We're working together, and they've invited me to run workshops, a couple workshops this year at the regional coaches clinics, to start to talk to coaches. I mean, yeah, I appreciate the amount of things that are on their plate and how they are navigating all of the things, especially given the pandemic and all of that. And also it's been slow. I mean, it's been slow moving.
Yeah.
There was a mental health task force that was created that I was part of. But again, with all the parts and pieces, and I think the personnel, like I really believe they're doing the best that they can with the resources they have. And my thing is like, I also get to work with athletes and other NGBs, and in particular, one athlete who's just recently retired. She's, world champion in her sport, and like they're in similar places. And so it's like my thing is, where's the US Open? Like, let's helping to create these resources so that the NGBs aren't left to their on their own to do this, to do all this.
Right.
So yeah, I've lots of.
How do you think you would have responded if someone like you had have come into a situation like the Olympic Games, and in a period of time in the lead up to the Olympics, worked with you at that particular point in time, or maybe even worked with the University of Georgia while you were there and swimming? Like, how would you have embraced somebody like you trying to do what you're doing?
Yeah, the comparison, or like what I can pull on, is what Greg was for me, which was
right
beyond, like at first that resistance, of course, because it was just like, who's this guy? What are we doing here? Why am I doing this work? And then it was transformative. And so I looked forward to those meetings, and I was so grateful.
Yeah.
I will say it was so strange in 2000. This is like a random side story, but they brought in someone about nutritional supplements. So like, again, the 3 pillars, 3 things you can train: physical, like technical, and mental.
Yeah.
And it was like supplement city. Like this guy was talking about all these supplements you need. And we were at training camp, and I'm 18 going like, I drink protein with my nose closed because it's disgusting. Like, so I felt way overwhelmed, and it actually sent me spinning. So I think we've got to go upstream. Like, we've got to go start to plant the seeds, help our coaches, equip them with language, right? Supporting the LFCs. And then when it comes to athletes starting to make teams and being invited to camp, is having this steady flow of information and onboarding where they're able to do the skill building, right? And to have these conversations so that it's not out of the blue. Like, oh, you made the team now, and here's 100 things you need to know, and also this. Like, that just feels like too reactive.
Yeah. I'd imagine your thoughts on mental toughness have changed over the years too. Like, I think, in terms, someone had asked you at 18, define mental toughness for me, you may have said one thing, and now 20 years later, you might say something completely different. So what is mental toughness to you, you think?
I love that you asked this. So my dad was a football player, and I would have, like, it's like we joke, like I had a linebacker mentality. So I would have told you then at 18 that it's just about sucking it up, plowing through, like punching people in the face, and like enduring as much pain as you possibly can.
Right.
And then you say, like, okay, where'd that land you when you're like just after your 19th birthday, battling this depression and all these things? At what cost? Right. That question of at what cost. So this past year, 2022, I was invited to the Collegiate Strength Coaches Association to present and share my story and talk about mental health. And I was followed by somebody presenting about mental toughness. And I literally was like holding my breath, like, is he going to undo everything I'm doing? Like, I'm identifying like the 3 core skills. I'll share them openly. So mindfulness is evidence-based. And that is something that elevates well-being and also aids in flow state, right? Accessing flow state. Emotional agility, same thing, evidence-based. And then you have self-compassion, again, evidence-based, all of them, right? And so here I'm talking about self-compassion in a room full of strength coaches. And then the guy follows, a researcher from Plattsburgh State. And I stayed, and I was sitting in the back with my husband going like, okay, how's this going to go? When he showed, he studied high performers, and he used strength coaches, which is why he was there reporting out, master strength coaches. And his findings mirrored exactly what I was saying. It was the coolest thing. Yeah. So I love what he has, like a mental toughness index that he's created, and like where you can gauge. So I use that, like, where are you at? And let's grow these skills. And he talks about 8 dimensions of mental toughness, and how like mental toughness isn't just about sucking it up and bulldozing with this like bravado and false confidence. This is about learning how to navigate and be adaptable and flexible and navigate the internal world. Right. And so these dimensions, emotional agility is part of that, right? Being able, like, resilience and buoyancy. And so I would define it in that this multi-pronged approach of, like, it's not just about grit. It's also about grace. It's also about when you're post-race, not in the middle of a race. This was a cool distinction, because that's one of the questions I've had from football players is like, I'm supposed to be like speaking kindness to myself when I'm on the football field smashing faces. And there's a time and a place to really lean into that self-kindness and that self-talk, right? When I talk about self-kindness, is that inner encourager versus like berating yourself. And that is like that post-performance period where beating ourselves up controls nothing, right? Like that's not helping us. It's actually driving cortisol. There's damaging effects beyond just doesn't feel good. So that approach of looking at all these dimensions and understanding that true mental toughness. And actually, have you read Do Hard Things by Steve
No,
Magnus?
I've seen it. No, I haven't read it.
Yeah, Steve Magnus is another person who's compiling research and sharing these very similar message of true toughness isn't just about bulldozing through, right? This is about being able to know and distinguish, because so that moment you talked about of like, do I push through or do I take a, let's say, rest day or pull back a bit? Like at what cost? If I push through, that's actually not what's best for my performance, right? So being able to go into those spaces and have the awareness and the flexibility and agility internally to know what is that next best step. And if I don't know, who can I call in? So it's true. So I call it, I do, and I teach this. This is where I come at, like, what is true toughness? What is the old school way? And what is true toughness and why does it matter? Right? What are in that idea of true toughness? I think there's still like a lot of stickiness around getting our, lifting our thumbs off, like taking that, like releasing that grip of control that we think we have over athletes, and that like mentality of just coming at them and just cutting them up is like, that's the motivating factor. There's fear in letting that go because there's fear of losing control.
Yeah.
And in fact, like what we see is actually you're going to have thriving humans.
Right.
Who knows what they'll do,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was sitting here thinking that, we talk about athlete awareness, but there's also coach awareness too, and growth, right? For sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're the ones that need to go through a lot of this retraining, I'd imagine, kind of reprogramming of, how to get the best out of the modern day athlete. We're not talking about athletes 20 years ago or even 10 years ago now. Yeah. This is the modern day athlete where they are more aware of these things. And I think coaches need to shift with that awareness as well, right?
Yeah. And I would say that most are willing. Like they really, and also they're human, and there's like they've got stuff just like we all have stuff, right? So it's,
well, the old stuff used to work, right? It did used to work,
Yeah, I would say it also got cost.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a cost. But then but they just made it work, right? And they dealt with the cost, whatever the cost was. They still had success, right? And I'm thinking of some particular coaches that have gone through some stuff recently where, it's kind of come out in the press with certain coaches that maybe they just didn't make those adjustments when they needed to, and they were getting results a certain way 10, 15 years ago. And you just can't get results like that anymore. Like the athletes have shifted, the culture has shifted,
Yeah. And what we know about the brain and what we know about performance, like we know more now. And so I think there is that fear. And I also I feel like part of my work in the world is to be a disruptor. So I want to challenge the story that people like Michael, who I would say, like in Sydney, we were close. We were part of like the younger kid crew. And so, that was one of those, like, we learned what he was going through or kind of witnessing was hard, because you're like, we were both suffering, like side by side. But when you look at someone like his story, we use these examples of like, well, see, it worked, like that style worked. I would say, how do we know what the story would have been if they were healthy, thriving, supported, aware, agile, and all those? Like we've kind of embraced the idea that was the best they could have done. And I say, like, who knows what could be done if they were coming from this healthy place.
Right.
Like we've just stopped and said, okay, we believe this story to be true, that was the best that they could have got out of them. And I say, like, I don't know, like what would have happened, and why is the assumption that they would have done worse or not as good without that kind of coaching, old school coaching, right?
Right. So how do people get in contact? Are you open for business, or are you completely full, or can people reach out to you?
So it's really cool. So yes, I do have some space. The academy space was designed so I have room for one more high touch consulting
awesome.
with a team or organization. And that is why the academy, I publicly turned it outward and said it's open for others, and I will support in that way. So because that was previously like an in-house thing for teams that I was working with. So now people can come as an individual, or they can have, like, a coach can reach out and get a master discount for their team to go through it together, or even a cohort of athletes. So that's open as well.
So where do they connect with that?
So SamanthaLivingstone.com is probably the best place.
SamanthaLivingstone.com.
Yeah.
Okay, get on that. There's some spots
Mm-hmm.
available. Everyone, so get in there. We all need it. We all need it. So good
All
stuff.
all different kinds of coaches. Yes, in our lives.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing this. Thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, nice to catch up, and really important message in there. Really good stuff, and
Thank you.
yeah, you're doing good work. So keep it up, all right?
And I feel the same about you. Thank you for the stories that you share and pull from people and create that container. It's really beautiful, and I think it's transformed our sport, and really not even just our sport, but our world, because
I
of the ripple
appreciate
it
it.
has. So,
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for being part of it. All right. Take care, Sam.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.